Montana Territory, 1882. The harsh winter had finally surrendered to spring, leaving the town of Silver Creek nestled between snow-capped mountains and meadows bursting with wildflowers. Like the changing seasons, Jacob Morgan was a man caught between worlds, skilled with horses and cattle, respected among the cowhands, yet haunted by a conviction that had shadowed him since boyhood. Love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford on the frontier. At 25, Jacob had already seen enough death to last several lifetimes. His parents' homestead burned to ash by raiders when he was 12, leaving him orphaned and hardened. He'd built a modest reputation as the youngest trail boss for the Rockingham Ranch, owned by his late father's friend who'd taken him in. His lean frame carried muscle earned through years of breaking horses and driving cattle, his sandy blonde hair typically hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed eyes the color of a summer sky. When he removed that hat, as he did now while entering the Silver Creek General Store, women noticed, though Jacob pretended not to see their glances. No use getting tied down, he often told the other hands. This land takes everything eventually. Better to ride alone. Jacob believed this with the certainty of someone who'd watched everything he loved turn to dust. The frontier demanded self-reliance. Attachment was weakness, and weakness got you killed. His plan was simple. Save every penny, buy his own piece of land someday, and work it alone. No wife to widow, no children to orphan when the unforgiving West eventually claimed him. What he didn't realize, as he stepped into the store that April morning to purchase supplies before the spring cattle drive, was that his carefully constructed worldview was about to collide with its greatest challenge. Victoria Matthews stood at the counter, her honey blonde hair cascading down her back in loose waves, partially contained by a blue ribbon that matched her calico dress. At 20 years old, she possessed both the refined manners of Eastern finishing schools and the practical knowledge of frontier life. Her delicate features, high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of polished amber, were animated as she spoke to the shopkeeper about an order of fabric. Jacob froze in the doorway. He'd seen pretty women before, but something about her presence made the dusty store seem suddenly filled with light. When she turned and smiled politely at him, he nodded awkwardly before making his way to the counter, keeping his distance. "Mr. Peterson," Jacob said gruffly to the shopkeeper. "Need supplies for the drive. 20 men, 3 weeks." He handed over a list, careful not to look at the young woman again. "I'll have it ready by tomorrow, Jacob," the shopkeeper replied. "How's old man McAllister treating you these days?" "Fair enough. Ranch is doing well after that hard winter." The blonde woman turned toward him then. "Did you say McAllister's ranch?" "The Rockingham." Jacob reluctantly met her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." Her face brightened. "What wonderful timing. I'm Victoria Matthews. I've just arrived yesterday on the stage from Boston. George McAllister is my uncle. I'm to stay with him until my wedding in June." Jacob's stomach dropped inexplicably. "Wedding?" "Yes," she said, eyes glowing with excitement. "I'm to marry Charles Whitcomb. He owns the largest cattle operation in Wyoming Territory. Uncle George arranged it all. I haven't actually met Charles yet, but Uncle says he's a fine man of considerable means. Charles is 42 and a widower, but Uncle assures me he's quite distinguished." The shopkeeper interjected. "Whitcomb's got 3 ranches and more cattle than anyone for 500 miles. They say his main house has real glass windows brought all the way from New York." Jacob found himself saying, "I could escort you to the ranch, Miss Matthews. I'm headed back that way." The offer surprised even himself. Jacob made it a rule never to complicate his life with female company. Yet something about the thought of this young woman, barely 20, being shipped off to marry a man more than twice her age stirred a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. "That would be most kind, Mr. Morgan," Victoria smiled, gathering her purchases. "I was told someone would collect me this afternoon, but it seems my plans have improved." As they stepped outside into the bright Montana sunshine, Jacob helped Victoria onto his horse before mounting behind her. The moment her back pressed lightly against his chest, something shifted in Jacob's carefully ordered world. The scent of lavender mingled with the familiar leather and dust he knew so well, creating something altogether new. "Hold tight," he murmured, nudging his horse forward. "It's about an hour's ride." As they traveled through meadows bursting with spring wildflowers, Jacob found himself breaking another personal rule. making conversation. What brings a Boston lady to Montana territory? Besides the arranged marriage, that is. Victoria's laugh carried on the breeze. My parents passed last year, influenza. Uncle George is my only living relative. He wrote that I should come west, where I might find a proper husband and a new beginning. She paused. I've always dreamed of adventure, Mr. Morgan. Boston was lovely but confining for a woman. At least here, I might see something of the world before settling into married life. And does marrying a man you've never met qualify as adventure? Jacob couldn't keep the edge from his voice. She stiffened slightly against him. It's a sensible arrangement. Women have few options out here. I'm fortunate to have such a promising match. Promising, Jacob echoed, falling silent as they rode on. They crested a hill, and the valley spread before them, the Rockingham buildings visible in the distance. Victoria gasped at the beauty, mountains rising in the distance, the lush valley scattered with cattle, spring creeks winding silver ribbons through emerald grass. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen, she whispered. Jacob felt an unexpected surge of pride. This land gets in your blood. I can see why. She turned slightly, looking up at him. Have you always been a cowboy, Mr. Morgan? The question opened something in him. Before Jacob realized it, he was telling her about losing his parents, about McAllister taking him in, teaching him cattle and horses. He spoke of his dreams to have his own small ranch someday. Words he rarely shared spilled from him like water from a broken dam. As they approached the ranch, Victoria said softly, It seems we're both orphans finding our way, Mr. Morgan. Their arrival at the Rockingham was met with considerable commotion. George McAllister, a robust man with a silver beard, rushed out to greet his niece with uncharacteristic emotion. Victoria, my dear girl. He helped her down from the horse before turning to Jacob with surprise. Morgan, I was sending Williams to town for her. We crossed paths at the general store, Jacob explained, suddenly aware of how inappropriate it might seem that he'd brought her home. McAllister studied him for a moment, then nodded. Well, good thinking. Get yourself cleaned up, Morgan. We're having a proper dinner tonight to welcome my niece. That evening, Jacob found himself in the uncomfortable position of wearing his only good shirt, seated at the ranch house dining table. He'd nearly declined the invitation, but something about Victoria's smile when McAllister had insisted he join them made refusal impossible. The dinner conversation revolved around Victoria's upcoming marriage to Charles Whitcomb. McAllister described Whitcomb's vast holdings, his political connections, the life of comfort Victoria would lead. He'll arrive in 3 weeks' time to meet you, McAllister announced. The wedding's set for June 15th, giving you plenty of time to become acquainted. Victoria smiled politely, but Jacob caught something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty quickly concealed. And what if they don't suit? Jacob heard himself ask, earning a sharp look from McAllister. Nonsense. Victoria understands the practical nature of marriage on the frontier. Whitcomb is the finest match in the territory, respected, wealthy, established. Of course, Victoria nodded dutifully. I'm certain Mr. Whitcomb and I will get along splendidly. Later that night, unable to sleep, Jacob walked down to the corral where he often went to think. To his surprise, Victoria stood at the fence, staring up at the star-filled Montana sky. Miss Matthews? Is everything all right? She turned, moonlight catching the tear tracks on her cheeks. Just Victoria, please. And yes, I'm fine. I'm simply overwhelmed by it all. Jacob approached carefully, leaning against the fence beside her. Having second thoughts about marrying a stranger? She laughed softly. Is it that obvious? I shouldn't complain. Many women would envy my position. Doesn't mean you have to want it. She looked at him then, really looked, as though seeing something new. What choice do I have? I have no family except Uncle George, no fortune of my own. Women don't have many paths in this world, Mr. Morgan. Jacob, he corrected. And maybe there are more paths than you think. The next morning brought unwelcome news. McAllister approached Jacob as he saddled his horse for the day's work. Change of plans, Morgan. You'll be staying here instead of leading the spring drive. Jacob's head snapped up. Sir, Hopkins will lead the drive. I need you here. McAllister lowered his voice. Victoria needs looking after, showing around, learning the territory. Can't have my niece bored to tears before Whitcomb arrives. Jacob's protest died on his lips. The thought of 3 weeks in Victoria's company instead of driving cattle through treacherous mountain passes shouldn't have been appealing. And yet, yes, sir, he said simply. Those 3 weeks changed everything. Jacob showed Victoria the breadth of the Rocking M's holdings, teaching her to ride astride rather than side saddle, guiding her to hidden waterfalls and spectacular vistas. He introduced her to ranch work, surprising himself when she insisted on learning to rope a calf and help with the spring branding. Victoria proved a quick study, her Eastern refinement giving way to frontier practicality. Her laughter came more frequently, her questions about ranch life never ending. Each day, Jacob found himself sharing more stories of cattle drives, winter storms, frontier justice. I never imagined the West would be like this, Victoria admitted one afternoon as they rested their horses atop a ridge overlooking the valley. The letters I received in Boston painted it as nothing but hardship and barbarism. There's plenty of that, Jacob acknowledged. But there's freedom here too. Room to breathe. Room to become who you're meant to be. She studied him thoughtfully. And who are you meant to be, Jacob Morgan? The question struck deeper than she could know. Just a man with some cattle and horses, I suppose. He paused. I always figured I'd be alone. Safer that way. Safer. Everyone I've ever loved is gone. Out here, getting attached is asking for heartbreak. The words emerged before he could stop them. Victoria moved her horse closer to his. That sounds terribly lonely. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Jacob forgot every rule he'd made for himself. He nearly reached for her hand, but the distant sound of approaching riders shattered the moment. We should head back, he said gruffly, turning his horse toward the ranch. The next morning, Jacob's world tilted on its axis. He was mending a fence when Victoria approached, her face ashen. Charles Whitcomb will arrive tomorrow, she said, her voice hollow. Uncle received a telegram. He's coming early to become acquainted before the wedding. Jacob drove a post into the ground with unnecessary force. That's good news, isn't it? You'll finally meet your intended. Yes, of course. She hesitated. Jacob, these weeks have been. I've never felt so alive. So myself. He couldn't look at her. You'll be Mrs. Whitcomb soon. A life of luxury awaits. Is that all you have to say? Her voice cracked slightly. Jacob finally met her eyes, seeing hurt and confusion there. What would you have me say, Victoria? That I've come to care for you? That the thought of you marrying Whitcomb makes me want to ride as far from here as possible? What good would that do either of us? So you do care, she whispered. It doesn't matter what I feel. You're promised to another man. A better man than a landless cowboy with nothing to offer but hard work and harder living. She stepped closer. I think I would prefer the cowboy. Before Jacob could respond, McAllister's voice boomed across the yard. Victoria, come quickly. We've news. The arrival of Charles Whitcomb the next day brought with it a revelation that sent shockwaves through the ranch. The man who stepped down from the expensive carriage wasn't the distinguished cattleman everyone expected, but a heavy-set, red-faced man whose eyes traveled over Victoria with calculating appraisal. So this is the girl, Whitcomb said, barely bothering with pleasantries. Pretty enough. Bit thin, but she'll do. Jacob, watching from the barn doorway, felt his hands clench into fists. The situation deteriorated at dinner. Whitcomb dominated the conversation with tales of his wealth and influence, frequently interrupting Victoria when she attempted to speak. When he mentioned his plans to send her back east after the wedding, to acquire proper manners befitting Mrs. Whitcomb, Jacob saw the color drain from her face. I thought we would be living at your Wyoming ranch, Victoria said carefully. Whitcomb laughed. Eventually, perhaps. First, you need polishing. Can't have a wife who smells of horses and talks about cattle. Besides, I've business interests that require extended stays in Chicago and New York. Later that evening, Jacob found Victoria at the corral again, tears streaming down her face. I can't do it, she whispered when she saw him. He's nothing like Uncle described. He's cruel, Jacob. I saw how he treated his driver, how he speaks to the ranch hands, and the way he looks at me. She shuddered. Jacob fought the urge to take her in his arms. Talk to your uncle. Surely he wouldn't force you to marry someone who treats you poorly. I tried. He says I'm being dramatic, that all men of importance have commanding personalities. She looked up at him desperately. He says I'll learn to appreciate Charles's strength of character. The next 2 days were torture for Jacob. He watched as Whitcomb paraded Victoria around like a prized acquisition, making pronouncements about her future as though she had no say. McAllister seemed blind to Victoria's distress, focused only on the advantageous connection. Everything changed on the third day when Jacob overheard a conversation between Whitcomb and one of his men behind the barn. "The girl's inheritance is secure?" Whitcomb was saying. "Yes, sir. Her parents' fortune is substantial, just as McAllister said. Once you're married, you'll control it all. Should solve our financial difficulties." "Good. I need this marriage. The Wyoming ranch is mortgaged to the hilt, and the creditors are circling. Once I have her money, we'll be back on solid ground." Jacob froze. Victoria believed she had no fortune, that her parents had left her nothing but the connection to her uncle. If Whitcomb was talking about an inheritance, something wasn't right. That night, Jacob broke into McAllister's office while everyone slept. Among the papers in his desk, he found letters from Victoria's parents' Boston attorneys, documents showing a substantial trust in Victoria's name, to be released upon her 21st birthday or her marriage. McAllister had been named trustee until then. Further searching revealed financial records showing McAllister's own desperate circumstances. The Rockingham was failing, mortgaged heavily, with loan payments months overdue. And there, at the bottom of a contract, Jacob found the truth. McAllister had agreed to arrange Victoria's marriage to Whitcomb in exchange for enough money to save his ranch. He was selling his niece. Jacob confronted McAllister at dawn, away from the main house. "You're selling her to pay your debts," Jacob said, throwing the papers at McAllister's feet. "She trusts you, and you're trading her like cattle." McAllister's face hardened. "Mind your place, boy. Victoria will have a better life with Whitcomb than she could dream of here. Yes, I get something from the arrangement, but don't we all need to survive? Does she know about her inheritance? The money her parents left her?" McAllister's silence was answer enough. "I'm telling her everything," Jacob said, turning to leave. "You do that, and you're finished at the Rockingham," McAllister called after him. "What then? You've got no land, no money. What can you offer her except poverty and hardship? Whitcomb can give her everything." Jacob stopped. "Except happiness." He found Victoria walking alone near the creek, her face troubled. When he told her everything, the inheritance, McAllister's deal with Whitcomb, the failing ranch, she listened in stunned silence. "I don't understand," she finally said. "Why wouldn't Uncle tell me about the inheritance? I would have helped him willingly." "Because then you wouldn't need to marry Whitcomb," Jacob explained gently. "And he wouldn't get his payment for delivering you." Tears filled her eyes. "What do I do now?" "You have options, Victoria. With your inheritance, you could go anywhere, do anything." She looked at him intently. "And where would you suggest I go, Jacob Morgan?" His heart hammered against his ribs. "I can't answer that for you." "Can't or won't." She stepped closer. "These past weeks with you have shown me what life could be. Not easy, perhaps, but real." "True." Her hand reached for his. "I don't want easy. I want real." Before Jacob could respond, shouts erupted from the direction of the ranch house. They ran back to find Whitcomb in a rage, McAllister's office ransacked. "Where are the papers?" Whitcomb was bellowing at McAllister. "The inheritance documents are gone." Jacob realized his mistake. In confronting McAllister, he'd left evidence of his search. Now Whitcomb knew the trust existed and that someone had discovered their plan. Victoria stepped forward, her chin raised. "Looking for these, Mr. Whitcomb?" From her pocket, she produced folded papers, copies Jacob had missed. "I found them this morning while looking for stationery in my uncle's desk." Whitcomb's face purpled. "Give those to me, girl. You don't understand what you're meddling with." "I understand perfectly well," Victoria replied with surprising calm. "You're not marrying me. You're marrying my money. Money I never knew I had because my uncle kept it from me." She turned to McAllister. "How could you?" McAllister's shoulders slumped. "The ranch is failing, Victoria. I'm months from losing everything. Whitcomb offered a solution that benefited us all. A solution that treated me like property to be sold." Her voice cracked with hurt. Whitcomb stepped forward menacingly. "This changes nothing. The wedding happens as planned. You're contracted to me now." Jacob moved between them. "She's not going anywhere with you. And who's going to stop me? You? A nobody ranch hand." Whitcomb laughed cruelly. "McAllister, control your man before I do it for you." What happened next unfolded with frightening speed. Whitcomb lunged for Victoria, attempting to grab the papers. Jacob intervened, and Whitcomb drew a hidden pistol. In the struggle that followed, the gun discharged, the bullet grazing Jacob's arm. Ranch hands, drawn by the commotion, restrained Whitcomb as Victoria rushed to Jacob's side. "You're bleeding," she gasped, pressing her handkerchief to his wound. "It's nothing," Jacob assured her, though the burning pain suggested otherwise. The local sheriff, summoned by a ranch hand, arrived to find chaos. After hearing multiple accounts, he arrested Whitcomb not only for the assault, but also for outstanding warrants from Wyoming Territory, fraud and embezzlement charges that explained his desperate need for Victoria's fortune. As Whitcomb was led away in handcuffs, he hurled threats and accusations. "This isn't over. I have powerful friends. The girl is promised to me." McAllister, shamefaced, approached Victoria as her wound was being bandaged. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. The ranch has been failing for years. I was desperate. You should have told me," Victoria said quietly. "I would have helped you without being sold into marriage." "And now?" McAllister asked. "What will you do?" Victoria looked at Jacob, who stood silently nearby. "That depends." Later that night, when Jacob's arm had been properly bandaged and the ranch had settled into uneasy calm, Victoria found him sitting alone on the porch. "How's the arm?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I'll live," he replied with a small smile. "Though my pride's more wounded than my arm. Some protector I turned out to be. You stood between me and harm," Victoria said softly. "No one's ever done that for me before." They sat in silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "I spoke with the attorneys in town by telegram," Victoria finally said. "The inheritance is substantial. Enough, to start somewhere new. To build something." Jacob nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "My 21st birthday is next month," she continued. "I'll have full control of my trust then. No need for trustees or guardians." "You could go anywhere," Jacob said, echoing his earlier words. "Back east, even. To the life you knew." Victoria turned to face him fully. "That's not the life I want anymore." She took a deep breath. "Earlier today, you said I had options, but you didn't tell me what you wanted." Jacob met her gaze. "What I want doesn't matter. I have nothing to offer you, Victoria. No land, no fortune, just hard work and calloused hands." "You're wrong," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "You have everything to offer. You showed me what life could be, honest, real. You saw me as a person, not a possession." Her fingers intertwined with his. "My heart belongs with yours, Jacob Morgan. That's what matters." In that moment, the walls Jacob had built around his heart for years crumbled entirely. He pulled her gently to him, mindful of his injured arm, and kissed her, a kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering. "I love you," he said when they finally parted. "I think I have since that first day on the ridge. But loving someone on the frontier means watching them face hardship, danger." She silenced him with another kiss. "And joy, and wonder, and life fully lived. I choose that life, Jacob, with you." 2 months later, the town of Silver Creek witnessed a wedding unlike any they'd seen before. Victoria Matthews, in a simple white dress adorned with wildflowers, married Jacob Morgan beneath an arch of pine boughs at the edge of a meadow. Her inheritance had purchased a promising piece of land adjacent to the struggling Rockingham, land with good water and rich grass. McAllister, still working to make amends, stood as Jacob's best man. The terms of Victoria's forgiveness had been clear: honest partnership in rebuilding both ranches, with no more secrets between them. As they spoke their vows against the backdrop of Montana's mountains, Jacob finally understood the truth that had eluded him for so long. The frontier wasn't just a place of loss and hardship. It was also a place where broken people could rebuild, where new beginnings were possible, where love could flourish in the most unlikely soil. That evening, as they stood on the porch of their new cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Victoria leaned into her husband's embrace. "Happy?" Jacob asked, his arms wrapped around her waist. "More than I knew possible," she replied. "Though I warn you, I intend to be a most unconventional rancher's wife. I expect to work alongside you, not just keep house." Jacob laughed. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As darkness fell, they watched a star shoot across the sky, a fitting symbol for the journey that had brought them together. Two orphans had found family in each other, proving that even in the harsh reality of the frontier, love could not only survive but thrive. Your heart belongs with mine, Jacob whispered against her hair, echoing the words he'd first spoken on that fateful night when everything changed. Always. Victoria turned in his arms, her smile containing all the promise of their future together. Always, she agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss.